Prime Field.
UConn just ran through the Big East tournament and won the league by doing something that should make the rest of the country a little nervous. They did not need to empty the tank from the starters to dominate. This team beat Georgetown 84-39, Creighton 100-51, and Villanova 90-51. That is a combined plus 113 across 3 games. And if you are a die-hard UConn fan, you already know the biggest takeaway is not just that they won the 24th Big East title. It is that the bench looked like a real March weapon. So today we are doing the full post-tournament bench ranking. Every reserve gets a 1-10 score based on what they actually gave UConn in this run. And by the end, we are crowning the one bench player Geno trusts most heading into March Madness. And I'm telling you right now, one player is not just insurance anymore. She looks like the engine of the second unit. The context here matters, because this was not a random regular season stretch where the bench gets garbage time run and we all overreact. This was tournament basketball, and UConn's depth was a real reason the Huskies could stay aggressive the entire way through. Geno basically said the quiet part out loud. Having a deep bench lets UConn play full out defensively without worrying about foul trouble. That is huge. That means these minutes are not cosmetic. These are system-preserving minutes. These are identity minutes. And when you go game by game, you can see different bench players solving different problems. Against Georgetown, it was energy and clean execution. Against Creighton, it was playmaking and control. Against Villanova, it was rebounding, scoring bursts, and bounce-back performances. That is why this ranking is interesting, because not every bench player is filling the same role. Some are there to stabilize, some are there to pressure, some are there to steal possessions, and 1 or 2 are starting to look like true swing factors once this thing shifts to the National Collegiate Athletic Association Tournament. Let us start with the top sub of this tournament, because to me this one is the clearest call on the board. Kayleigh Heckel gets a 9.5 out of 10. Against Creighton, she gave UConn 9 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 steal, and only 1 turnover in 23 minutes, while shooting 57% from the field. That is not a nice little bench stat line. That is a game-commanding stat line. And the number that jumps off the screen for me is the 7 assists. Because scoring off the bench is always useful, but facilitating like that changes the geometry of the game. That tells you she can actually organize the offense, not just survive it. The biggest story here is the growth. She came in as insurance, basically someone to take pressure off the starting guards. But over the last 4 months, the growth curve has exploded. The research says she has grown more in that stretch than the previous 2 years combined. And honestly, that tracks when you watch the role now. She's seeing things earlier. She's making cleaner reads. She's impacting possessions before the box score even catches up. And this is where I will get opinionated. I think she has moved past being just a backup guard. I think she is now one of the lineup connectors UConn can trust when the game gets weird. If there's a late-game National Collegiate Athletic Association tournament stretch where the offense needs composure more than speed, Heckel has a real case to be on the floor. The other thing I love is the rebounding. 8 boards from a reserve guard against Creighton matters. Those are extra possessions, extra runouts, extra chances to break a team's spirit. And for a team trying to stay relentless for 40 minutes, that kind of backcourt rebounding is gold. Geno saying he would not trade her right now for anybody else tells you everything. That is not coach speak. That is trust. That is earned status. And heading into March, I think Heckel is the one bench player opponents actually have to plan for. Next up is probably the most fascinating bench story of the tournament. Blanca Quiñonez gets an 8.5 out of 10. Why? Because this was not a steady, quiet 3-game stretch. This was a roller coaster. And honestly, that might make it even more meaningful. Geno labeled her the X Factor for the National Collegiate Athletic Association Tournament. And then against Creighton, she had what was described as a miserable performance, including 7 missed layups. That kind of game can mess with a player, especially in March, especially when confidence is everything. But what happened next is why her stock actually went up for me. In the Villanova final, she bounced back and led the bench with 13 points in just 18 minutes, added 3 steals, had 0 turnovers, and shot 50% from the field. That is the exact response you want from an X Factor. Not perfection, resilience. Because let us be honest, the question with bench scorers is never just can you score, it is can you score after a bad night, after a bad stretch, after your confidence gets punched in the face. Blanca answered that. She did not spiral, she reset, she attacked again. And the 3 steals matter too, Because if she is giving you scoring juice and defensive activity, now you are talking about a player who can swing tournament momentum in short bursts. My hot take here is that she might be the bench player with the widest range of outcomes in March. That is both exciting and terrifying. On one hand, if the Villanova version shows up, she can absolutely be the primary scoring option when Sarah Strong is on the bench. On the other hand, if the finishing disappears again, you feel that volatility immediately. But after that bounce back, I lean toward trusting her more, not less. And if Geno is calling her the X factor, that tells me the internal belief is still very real. Jana El Alfy gets an 8 out of 10, and her case is simple. She's the interior safety net off this bench. Against Villanova, she had 4 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 0 turnovers, and shot 50% in just 13 minutes. 9 rebounds in 13 minutes is ridiculous. That is not just active. That is possession control. And this is where her value gets bigger than a single box score. UConn's biggest vulnerability in some matchups is size and physicality on the glass. El Alfy directly addresses that. She gives you extra possessions, she absorbs contact, and she makes life harder for teams that think they can wear UConn down in the paint. The 0 turnovers are also big for a reserve post. That means she is not wasting those minutes. She's not giving back the possessions she wins. I think what makes Jana indispensable is that her role translates cleanly to National Collegiate Athletic Association. Tournament basketball, rebounding travels, rim protection travels, physicality travels. You can have an off shooting night. You cannot fake control of the glass. My opinion here is pretty strong. Against bigger front lines, she might be the one bench player UConn cannot afford to lose to foul trouble. That is how important those extra possessions become once the margins tighten. And if you are projecting forward, her role might actually grow the deeper this team goes. Allie Ziebell comes in at a 7.5 out of 10. Against Georgetown, she posted 9 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals in 21 minutes with 0 turnovers and 50% shooting. That is just a clean, winning bench line. Nothing wasted, no chaos, no empty possessions. She gave UConn perimeter scoring, moved the ball, defended, and did not cough it up. The research describes her perfectly. A reliable perimeter threat who gives you consistent scoring and defensive energy. And sometimes that kind of player gets underrated because the impact does not feel dramatic. But for a team with stars already on the floor, reliable is a weapon. She spaces the floor. She keeps the offense honest. And when the starters need a breather, the drop-off does not feel dramatic because she understands the role. Now, do I think she is forcing a major rotation shakeup? No. But do I think she has earned trust as a dependable tournament piece? Absolutely. And here's my debate line for the comments. If UConn gets into a game where the half-court offense gets sticky, does Ziebell deserve a longer leash simply because of the spacing? I think there is a case. Not because she is going to take over, but because her presence can make life easier for everybody else. Caroline Ducharme gets a 6.5 out of 10. Her line against Creighton was modest. 3 points, 2 rebounds, 0 assists, and 1 turnover in 8 minutes while shooting 33%. So the rating here is less about volume and more about role clarity. The research frames her as a veteran presence with instant offense capability, particularly with the 3-point shot against Georgetown and Creighton. And that still matters, even if the overall stat line was not huge, because sometimes the value of a veteran bench wing is not that she fills the entire box score. It is that she can come in cold and immediately threaten the defense. That alone can change substitution patterns and how aggressively teams help off the perimeter. That said, I do think this is where the conversation gets a little tougher. The minutes are limited, and limited minutes usually mean limited trust or limited matchup flexibility. So while the veteran presence is useful, I'm not sure she is currently forcing her way into a larger March role unless the shot becomes undeniable. My opinionated take, the idea of Ducharme might still be a little bigger than the current production, but the flip side is that if UConn suddenly needs one quick bucket from the bench in a tense National Collegiate Athletic Association game, she still feels like one of the names you would trust to find it. Kelis Fisher gets a 5.5 out of 10. Against Georgetown, she scored 5 points, grabbed 2 rebounds, had 0 turnovers, and shot 100% from the field in just 6 minutes. That is excellent efficiency. No argument there. And when she got chances, she made them count. The issue is the sample. The research is pretty clear that these were flashes in a blowout, and she saw less time in the higher stakes final against Villanova. So the production is encouraging, but it is hard to rank her much higher when the role still feels more situational than foundational. Still, this is the kind of player UConn fans should keep an eye on, because high-efficiency bench minutes can become very relevant very fast if foul trouble hits, or if the game script suddenly opens up. My take is that Fisher has not fully broken into the must-play group yet, but she has definitely made the break glass in case of chaos argument stronger. And on a team this deep, that matters. Ayanna Patterson gets a 5 out of 10. Against Villanova, she had 2 points and 2 rebounds in 5 minutes, shooting 33% with no turnovers. This is one of those lines where the raw numbers do not tell the whole story. The research talks about unseen moments like tip-ins, screens, and the kind of high-energy bursts that support the overall defensive disruption. That is a very real bench role on this UConn team. She is not there to run the offense. She's not there to be a featured scorer. She's there to inject force into the game for short windows. And that has value, especially in games where UConn wants to keep the pressure up physically. But I also think this is the kind of role that is hardest to guarantee in tighter National Collegiate Athletic Association games, because energy specialists often depend on matchup and whistle. So I like the activity, I like the rebounding support, but I cannot go much higher because the role still feels more supportive than essential. She helps the machine run. She is just not one of the main levers yet. When you zoom out, this is exactly what UConn wanted from its bench in a dominant tournament run. The reserves did not just soak up minutes. They preserved pressure, added scoring, won possessions, and in Heckle's case, straight-up controlled stretches of a game. You had elite facilitation from Kaylee Heckel, emotional bounce-back scoring from Blanca Kenyon, glass cleaning and rim presence from Jana El Alfy, stable floor spacing from Allie Ziebell, veteran shooting insurance from Caroline Ducharme, efficient flashes from Kelis Fisher, and useful energy minutes from Ayanna Patterson. And when all of that sits underneath a team that already won these 3 games by a combined 113 points, that is when the ceiling starts to look scary. Overall, the bench gets a 7.6 out of 10 for this game. In the final verdict heading into March Madness, Kayleigh Heckel is the top sub. She's the most trusted reserve, the most complete connector, and right now she looks like the bench player most capable of changing a tournament game without needing plays called for her. So now I want your take, because this is where the real debate starts. Do you trust Blanca Quiñonez to be the primary scoring punch when Sarah Strong is off the floor? Does Heckel's 7-assist game against Creighton mean she should be out there in late-game lineups next to KK Arnold? And who is the one bench player UConn absolutely cannot afford to lose to foul trouble in the Sweet 16? Drop your full bench rankings in the comments, and if you are riding with this team into March, subscribe, because next up we are breaking down which bench combinations Geno should trust most once the National Collegiate Athletic Association tournament gets serious, because winning the Big East by 113 combined points is one thing. Finding the 6 or 7 players who can win you 4 straight in March, that is the whole season.
Prime Field.